If you want to build an app, specifically maybe a SaaS business in 2026, you need to follow this exact framework right here that I'm about to show you, starting with our idea. Now, for our idea, we want to come over here and we want to actually validate our idea before we turn it into an MVP. How do we actually validate our idea? Now, before we even go over that, we need to know what validation is. Validation is basically knowing if people would actually buy your product. You don't want to make a product that no one would want to buy. And so what most people start doing is they go to Claude and say, give me some cool app ideas. Now, frankly, these are not going to work because you don't know if there is an actual target audience or even market for this demographic that people would buy as an app, right? So what should you do actually instead? So I'm going to give you two methods. Starting off with something that you can apply to B2B SaaS, right? If you're in B2B where you work with other businesses, you want to do the following. First, you just want to go out and contact people and just ask them, would they even buy for your product? Now, keep in mind, this is an actual idea at this point. You haven't built anything, right? At this point, it's an idea, not a product. Would they buy that product, right? And then if they say yes, you easily ship that MVP and get them as early customers. Now, what is a good example of this? Now, let's say locally you have some construction firms, right? Construction firms, they do project management and they do estimating as well as a whole variety of other things. Now, as an examples of knowing that they do project management and estimating, what you can do potentially for your idea is build some software that actually, negates the stress of doing this whole maybe estimating operation, right? And then you go up to these business owners, local areas in your city, in whatever it might be, and you ask them, would they be inclined to buy this product? Now, this is an example of B2B SaaS, right? You're working with another construction company. Then if they say yes, that'd be something really helpful for our operations. You would then get them as early customers, right? Now, this is for B2B SaaS, and majority of us, I'm assuming, are going to do something more B2C where you're actually going more consumer, right? Your target buyer is going to be on something like TikTok, Reels. It's more spread out. It's per individual, not for business. Now, the best way to do this, instead of asking an LLM for ideas, is to go on social media and find people complaining about a problem your product would actually solve. Notice that I have social media and Reddit in two different groups, and that's because social media, right, you have things like X, Pinterest, Quora, whatever it might be, and then you have Reddit. Reddit is literally a gold mine, right? You can go over to Reddit Ask and say, what are people complaining about that I can build an app product about? Around, right? And then it'll literally give you the subreddits where people are literally asking for this problem. They're literally asking for a solution on these subreddits, right? You can literally go to one of them, right? Almost 70 comments. So that's how you know that this is a legit problem and it could be something you can potentially build around, right? And one thing, you want to make sure that it's not just one person, right? But it's a recurring problem that a lot of other people also have. Now that we've gone over validation, we can actually go over our MVP. Now, for our MVP, all you need to do for your MVP is have it deployed on the web, the app store, whatever it is, and some sort of payment. You should not be focusing on perfectionism where you have every single feature down to the wire. It should not be the case at all. Your MVP only does the bare minimum. Your MVP needs to only do what the original problem was about and do that to the minimum yet fullest extent that it solves that problem, right? We don't want to be adding more features. We don't want to be doing all of that until you do marketing and get more users. And I'll explain that further. But for now, your MVP, you must ship fast, but you want to make sure it is the bare minimum at most. Now, if you want to go over how to actually build an MVP, we can actually go over building. However, in this day and age, building is not a fundamental problem that you should be having. It should be more towards your distribution and marketing. But for building, I recommend that you have a coding agent set up, right? Claude Code and Codex, the top two on the market, I'd say. However, for Claude Code, they are getting a bit quite stingy, I'd say, with rate limiting and pricing. So you might want to look into Codex maybe better. For design, right, you want to make sure that if you want to have a properly designed website, because that can play in well with your reputation and conversions, you want to make sure you're using something like Claude Design or Glamour. Again, Claude Design, you need to have an actual subscription, and that plays in hand with the current rate limiting and usage going on, so you can feel free to use Glamour instead if you want, or something else, as long as your design looks visually appealing and something that wasn't AI vibe slop coded. Next, your payment processor. This really doesn't matter. However, people have made it a debate throughout the years, and that's because the most default one people use is Stripe. However, they might charge a bit high, and then they don't do your taxes, and then Polar does that, and then Lemon Squeezy for one time. It doesn't matter. Just use one of them and just ship your app. And then finally, for version control, you want to use Git. The reason why you want to use version control, even if you have no coding experience, is because if you lose your stuff on your development environment, that's gone forever, right? You want to be making sure that you have it backed up into Git, so you can actually save your work and work on it in the future if you're on different devices. And then finally, you can link that up to your deployment. Now, the fastest way to deploy is using Vercel and Cloudflare. You can use any of the two. Vercel, I'd say, is much more beginner friendly, as you can just hook up your Git, and so every time you do a merge or main change, it'll redeploy that instance that you have changed. And that's basically how you build, right? Again, we want to make sure that for your MVP, you only focus on the bare minimum. Now that we've gone over our idea, our MVP, what we've validated, we can actually go on to marketing. So there are two things I advise you to do. The first thing is to build a waitlist. Now, this is before your MVP might even be done, or your whole product, right? Again, our MVP solves the bare minimum. Our product is the full solution, right? So I suggest having a waitlist. You want to reach out to family and friends. You want to get them as your early customers and paying users potentially. And the reason why is because as early users, they will not only give you feedback, but actually it'll show you what is working and what is not and what needs to be changed. So it's huge on feedback and huge on what works, maybe bug fixes and all that sort of stuff. So it is pivotal that you get some sort of family members and friends to try out your app to see what you can change and what needs improvement, right? Now, going back to our waitlist, the reason why I want you to use a waitlist is specifically for the marketing strategy of building in public. Now, you use this in pre-launch or while you're building. And basically how building in public works is you document building updates on specifically X or Twitter or any other social media platform. And the reason why is because you build trust with the community that you're in, with the users that interact with you on X, and it gives you early visibility. So what early visibility does for us actually is that it gives us initial marketing, right? When you launch your app without building in public, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. However, it gives you more recognition and credibility such that you build a community that can be used as monetization by sending them towards your app, right? And this is something you do pre-launch. Now, with post-launch, you want to go heavy in short form content, I'd say. That is the best form of marketing that you can possibly do, especially for B2C. A lot of your target audience is going to be on short form content with IG Reels and TikTok. So I split it into two ways. First one is paid ads and the second one is organic. I'll roughly go over organic first. For organic content, you are making the content, you are actually testing and editing and looking at what's working and what's not. And so with organic content, you need to be heavily relying on your metrics and statistics, on user retention, on views, on basically what you can do to help you go viral, help the algorithm push your content. And so for that, you want to be making sure that you're volume posting, right? You don't want to be posting one reel, one TikTok every other 3 days, right? You want to really be maximizing the amount of chance you can go viral by allowing the algorithm to help you push your content. So I'd say you want to be posting at least once a day. Then you want to be making sure that you A/B test and use those new features, trial reels, and look at your statistics, right? You want to be making sure every piece of content you look at, don't just post it and then go on to the next. Look at the statistics, look at the retention, look at the viewers. What are they viewing the most? What are they dropping off at? Is your hook good? Now, this is social media in itself, right? This would be another video, another whole category. But emphasize, you want to not be just blindly posting and leaving it and going on to your next piece of content you're working on. You want to look at truly what works and what doesn't. Now, before we go into paid ads, I want to talk about a potential funnel you can do with both paid ads and organic content, and it's called DM automation. What DM automation is, if you've ever gone on an IG reel, you see in the bio or the creator says, DM me a phrase, like any sort of phrase, buzzword. So let's say car, to learn more. This is DM automation, where the creator gets you to comment or direct message them a specific buzzword, then a CTA. This is the CTA right here, right? It's to learn more, right? In our case, it'd be like to sign up, to buy. It can be used in paid ads, whatever. For organic, it doesn't matter. The whole point is this in itself is a funnel. And the reason why is because when you add some sort of friction to access some other forms of content or other materials, you actually filter out casual user who might be curious compared to someone who it's targeted for your targeted audience. When you said DM car, people who are interested, that are truly wanting to learn, will DM you this. And as a result, you'll get a potential warm lead out of this. And with this funnel, you can then funnel them towards your actual website or other services, right? In our case, we're going to be sending them a link that goes directly to our SaaS website that's deployed on the internet for them to check out and potentially convert. You send a tailored DM with your product attached. So you don't need to use this in paid ads. You can also use this with organic. In fact, organic is probably the best use case of using this, where you show users content and then at the end, you add this DM automation setup, and it sets up a funnel where you get warm leads and you can potentially convert them to your SaaS. Now, going over the main thing with paid ads. Paid ads, you do not need to worry about the algorithm boosting it. And so with Meta ads, right, Meta will promote your product or whatever ad you have on Reels, on scrolling through your For You page, right, For You page, stories, and Facebook, right, if applicable to any of those in the tailored format. Right? And so with paid ads, the number one thing you want to be doing is you want to be testing and tuning campaigns. You don't want to leave your campaigns in the dark. You want to be looking at what's working. So for example, if you have two pieces of ads set up, or ad call, so let's say this is 1 and this is 2. The way Meta delegates your ad spend is by looking at algorithmically what is potentially better and what, fits towards the demographic provided of who they want to target. Obviously, with your ad copy and whatever your product is about, Meta actually does a good job internally of figuring out who to show your ads to. However, sometimes you might see something like Meta will spend maybe like $12 here. Let's say $12.72 in a day. And then this one, let's say it gets $0 because Meta genuinely thinks that this is like really bad or like would not convert. What you want to do is take a look at that, see if Meta is hypothesizing a correct statement, and then genuinely scrap this or optimize it. Or you can do the reverse and just go all in on this one right here by removing that and investing more into this one. So that's basically how you want to be testing and tuning your campaign. Now, with paid ads, how do we actually know that our campaign is, properly working and is profitable, right? At the end of the day, how do I know if 3 users went to my website and one of them converted? Is that a good thing for maybe $30 a day ad spend? How do I actually know that? Well, the way you actually look at it generally is through this metric called ROAS, which is your return on ad spend. And return on ad spend is basically telling you, so how do you know if your return on ad spend is good? Well, a return on ad spend, for example, of like $3 to 1 is very good. What does that tell you? That tells you for every $1 you have in ad spend, you get $3 back through your business with converting users. So you want to generally make sure that this value on the right here is always less than the value on the left. And that is a really good campaign. Now, some other things to go deeper and take a look at in campaigns is your cost per acquisition or your cost per lead. Now, your cost per acquisition is basically how much are you spending to get one user. That's basically it, right? Your cost per acquisition. How much are you spending to get users? Now, the equation for that is your total number of ad spend divided by the number of acquisitions. Keep in mind acquisitions. These are directly people who came from your funnel of paid ads, people who specifically converted from paid ads. So total ad spend divided by number of acquisitions. Now, to give an example, right, completely arbitrarily made up, let's say you spend a campaign in a month. Let's say you spend about $500. Now, for $500, you actually get 25 converting users onto your paid plans. Now, what is the cost per acquisition right there? Well, that would generally be just $20 per acquisition. So what is this telling us? This is telling us that we pay $20 on average to get one converting user to buy our product. Now, this is a metric in itself, right? There's nothing inherently bad about maybe $70 per acquisition if our paid plans are maybe like $179. How do we actually know if this is a good metric or a bad metric? Well, with our cost per acquisition and our cost per lead, you want to compare this with your ARPU. What is ARPU? ARPU is average revenue per user. Now, what does average revenue per user tell us? Average revenue is telling you how much do you have in revenue across your whole user database. How many people using your product? Keep in mind, if you're using a freemium app where you have a free plan and a paid plan, this is going to consist of people who are already on your free plan as well as your paid plan. So lifetime revenue divided by the number of users you already have. Average revenue per user. So for a lifetime revenue, let's say you have already 2,500 MRR for the month. You have $2,500 in monthly recurring revenue over, now we have 25 users that converted. We actually have 50 people here. 25 for sure are paying. The other 25 are a mix of paid plans and freemium or trial. It doesn't matter. Doing the math, it looks like that we have an average revenue per user of $50, meaning that on average, each user is bringing in $50. Keep in mind that, the paid plans account for the ones that are on the free trial. $50 per user that's bringing in for our business. Now, comparing that for our CPA with $20 per acquisition, and we're getting $50 per our user. The general rule of thumb is that if your CPA is less than your ARPU, then you are doing a good job. Everything is working out. That's really good. That's profitable, right? So we're paying $20 in acquisition to get $50 on average in revenue. And logically thinking, that makes sense for profitability and sustainability. You pay $20 on average for your ad campaign to get in lifetime on average revenue per user, $50. You're paying $20 to get $50 inherently. So with that would be, plus $30 on average. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly $30 just because it's 20 or 50. Those metrics are skewed because one is on a specific time frame and the other one is on lifetime. But in general, you should keep your CPA less than your ARP. And that's basically how paid ads should be. Now, this is just the general broad depth. I think that applies to a majority of SaaS businesses, but that within itself, paid ads on how to actually make winning ads funnels, that in itself is a completely entire video and separate content. That pretty much is how you exactly do it with paid ads. You want to make sure you have high ratios, 3 to $1. Finally, what is the last step? Retaining and scaling. So let's say we're at 2,500 MRR. How do we actually get to 5K and then 10K and then 10K and beyond, whatever. You get the point, right? How do we grow? How do we increase our revenue? It's quite simple. You take a look at what's working and you invest more into that. Or you can look at alternative strategies to add more volume to your traffic and do stuff like that. So for example, alternative marketing strategies, right? One can include SEO. You want to make sure that your business ranks first on the Google search engine, right? Really dominate a key phrase or a keyword. You want to dominate a keyword so that you actually appear first, such that users can easily go through your website. If you don't already rank first, then it's going to be hard to organically even get users to find you. Some other strategies worth looking at are UGC. And what UGC is basically user-generated content. Right? And how UGC works is you basically find influencers in your niche and you pay them X amount per Y views, say, for example. And the reason why this works is because it boosts trust, because influencers who already have an audience, right, and they're promoting an app, because of the trust they've already established being an influencer, their audience is more likely to trust what they're also saying. And the reason why, as a second example, is visibility. It adds more visibility, more people are going to know and talk about your product. And that's basically how you ship an app in 2026.